Nice to see you guys. Seated looks pretty popular. Let's start in a seat. And we'll just find our way into something that feels nice and supportive. I've been thinking about how the shape itself can support your breath. So maybe you find the tweaks and adjustments into your posture that allows for a little more fluidity in your breath. Maybe even allow that to be a guide through class. A lot of times we're so body centric or body forward that the posture almost becomes a hindrance to the fluidity of our breath. So at least for this moment, let's make that fluidity of our breath our primary focus, our priority. Let's give ourselves 60 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate, we'll allow the eyes to softly drift open. And with the eyes open, let's retract the scapula. Roll the palms up, retract the scapula, and lift the chin. Seated cow here. A little bit more capacity for the extension. Hips are a little bit less involved. Upper back extension anyway. And then we'll flip the palms down, tuck the chin, and round the back towards the back of the room. And let's bring our head and spine back to neutral. Just settle there and we'll transition to hands and knees tabletop. Kind of finding your way into as stable a hand position as you can create. And then from that stability of the hands, let's just lock in the torso angle. So we take the neutrality, we lock that in with a little core squeeze, and then we're just going to play with the shoulders a little bit. So with an exhale, let's just push up so we don't change the spinal flexion extension angle, but instead we just lift into the top of the shoulder structure. And then inhale and just sink in to the depth. And again, Staying neutral in the belly and spine. Exhale, we'll lift up. And inhale, we'll settle in. And let's just do that a couple more times. You know, it's a little bit of a mean ask this early in class to be this integrated in the spine, but nice to get the shoulders mobilized a little bit. And then when you feel like your next round is fully complete, let's flip the tops of the feet and sink our way back into child's pose. A question within the shift is what you want to do with your shoulders there. Potential for them to be a little bit fatigued. If they are, hands down by your sides will help alleviate that. If you feel like a little length is the more ideal space, maybe keep the hands anchored in front of you as you glide back. And we'll just be here for 20 more seconds. Nice kind of elongated opportunity to play within child's pose, to meet your child's pose this morning. And then eventually the hands will slide out in front of us. If they're not already there, we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, let's curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way back into just a nice little down dog. Just a little opportunity for exploration here. We're not going to be here remarkably long, but enough time kind of feel into what we do have available this morning. And then let's come back down to hands and knees tabletop, and we'll extend our legs out in front of us. So I find a staff, find a nice vertical spine, and keeping the spine vertical, let's bend the knees. And the knee bend here can be pretty intense is the wrong word. Active, though, that'll be a better word. And we'll slide our hands underneath the legs for a connection. Connection can be fingertips, it can be wrists, and it can be elbows, whatever feels most appropriate. But we want to actively compress the torso and our thighs. So get enough of an arm squeeze that you can make that happen. And then let's just release into that forward fold. If you make this can be very intense, right? But the amount of knee bend is 100% under your control. So just remember that you can make this as intense or as restorative as you want to. And that control is 100% and completely within the choices you make. Maybe a good opportunity to go back to the fluidity of the breath and how the adjustments, tweaks, and subtle shifts in posture can allow for more freedom and ease of breath, especially if the thoracic spine is really tight right now, right? When we get into this deep fold where we are torso posterior chain focused, the thoracic is very tight, it can feel and act as a restriction on your capacity to breathe. And we're going to be here for 30 more seconds. We'll elevate the spine back to neutral. Let's bring the bottoms of the feet together and clasp the hands over the toe mounds or ankles, whatever feels most appropriate for you. And then, because I didn't think that all the way through, if taking the hands to the toe mounds brings a forward fold, let's back that off to the ankles. We want to be able to get the spine vertical here. And then so hands are clasped on something where the spine can be vertical, and we're going to rotate towards that right shoulder. Rotation here has the effect of lumbar rotation, but we're also accessing that medial edge of the left thigh in this case. So as you're rolling from that thigh, really feel how the abductor musculature is put in play, even though the hips are neutral. And we'll come back to neutral with the torso. And let's just take ourselves forward into a little fold. Breathe nice and easy, fluidly and delicately. Remembering that our choices of body positioning are what truly impact the benefit from the practice, and that includes and should encompass the capacity for easy fluid breath. And we'll walk our way up to a vertical spine. With the spine vertical, making sure that you really access that neutrality. Let's turn towards the second side, the left shoulder. Again, lumbar rotation certainly in play. We also get that medial line activation now on the right hip, right thigh. And then when you feel balance left to right, whenever that is, no rush for that to be true. Torso comes back to neutral. And we'll once again find our way into forward fold. Just breathing in to this fold space. Last 10 seconds here. Just a little neutralization. And then we'll bring ourselves up to a neutral spine. And let's access our props here. So we're looking at belt slash strap, towel slash blanket. And before we get too set up, let's just make a lasso with our belt so that we can just have something to capture our foot. If you don't have that, we can work our way around it. So don't worry about if you don't have access. And then we'll take our blanket, and from a shelf fold, we'll go hot dog and end up with a nice little hot dog shaped prop coming behind us. If you know and you want this to be a roll, feel free to let it be a roll. We're just going to let our spine come down and be received here. So lowering your way down onto the prop, the tailbone meets the mat. You can adjust if you like having the head on the neutral plane. You can pull the blanket up so it's a little bit higher if your torso is a little bit longer than your prop. Or you can go the way that I have set up, which is just head flat against the mat. You get that little bit of a cervical spine adjustment as well as the lumbar spine adjustment kind of mirroring one another. Arms relaxing so that the palms are up. Really think about finding any position where the palms face up towards the ceiling. And we'll just slow things down a little bit here. So there's this very unique, very isolated hunter-gatherer society that's been existing on this island, isolated from the rest of the world for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. And one of the most interesting things about this society is its level of contentment. On this island, there are no predators large enough to endanger a human. They have no fear of predation. They're the only people on this island. And so there's no fear of outside community conflict. All kind of interpersonal disputes can be worked out within the community itself. There's plenty of food, plenty of water. And so all their needs are met. We'll give ourselves about 45 more seconds here. And with all needs met and no worries, this little population of humans is really allowed to just be happy. And so they are remarkably content. When it feels appropriate, let's bend both knees if they're not already bent. And then we'll just roll off of our prop one side or the other, whatever side feels the most drawing. And we can slide that prop to the side for now. And then let's access our strap if we have one. We're going to put that on our right foot, right in the arch. And we're going to extend that right leg skyward so that we find our way into a little supported length. So if you don't have the prop, you can just go hands behind the hamstrings here. We're just looking for a little opportunity to support some length. If you are using a strap or belt, make sure that you have the capacity to relax your shoulders. And so that the weight of the leg is not forcing you up into a compromised upper back position. We're not compromising the thoracic spine to get the hamstring bent. Remember, the knee can bend. And even if you have the strap, if the hands behind the hamstring feels more supportive, that might be the appropriate position for you. Eventually, we're going to take our strap into our right hand if it's not there, anchor that right elbow down to the mat, and then guide that right leg across our body to the left side of our mat of our room. And here we have a lot of choices again, right? As we land, the right shoulder can follow, so the right elbow can lift if you go into this much of a rotation. If the leg doesn't land, try to keep the elbow anchored, and then you can use that left hand as kind of a bracing thing. That being said, we all can land the leg, right? It's just how low we are willing to bring it. So make the decision for what feels best for this twist. If you land and you feel like you have plenty of room, the left hand is available and it can start to guide that right leg higher so that you get more access to that right hamstring. And then if that becomes a thing where the left hand is the guide, maybe you have the capacity to open that right shoulder up. If the leg's lower, right, and we land, we can do the same switch. We can take that left hand and just kind of allow it to be the stability piece, and the right shoulder can open. Just make the choice. What's the best deep twist for you? And then how much access do you want to get to this right hamstring? So everyone in this society is remarkably content, except for this one young girl. For whatever reason, she never settles in to the community downtime, to the community playtime. And instead, during those huge chunks of the day when the rest of her community is relaxing, she wanders off into the explore the island, into the jungles of the island. From a very little girl, she's heard this story about this mythical cave that exists on this island. But she knows for a fact it doesn't exist because she's been everywhere on this island. But on this one particular day, for whatever reason, she comes across this cave that she feels like shouldn't be there. She feels like she's explored this area of the island countless times, and yet she's standing at the entrance of this massive cave. And so she cannot deny its existence. Last 45 seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, we'll bring our right leg back up to neutral. Extend your left leg, really engage down the mat and pull the right thigh in towards the rib cage. Hands can transition to the shin or stay on the hamstring. So the compression here can feel a little bit more intense than normal because as we take that big twist and if we're pushing that leg, especially the right leg on the side, right, the femoral head can shift in its socket, so you may feel much more intensity than you are accustomed to as you create this compression. Totally normal. And then we'll extend our right leg back skyward, ceilingward, before we transition the strap over to the second side, left hand. And then the right leg is going to extend out wide this time. So we end up in a place where we have more access to this medial line, right? We're grateful that we opened that up earlier. As you land, the right hand now can be the assistant. The right hand can help to lift the leg towards the shoulder or head shape if that is beneficial for you. If you can breathe smoothly, if your body can relax, remembering that the choices you make are absolutely under your control. Just settling in to that inner band of hamstring awareness. This is one of the best ways to access that tissue, the tissue that doesn't really get directly isolated very frequently. And so this little girl finds herself at the mouth of this cave and she feels like she has absolutely no choice but to explore it. Every other cave on this island she's been through, and therefore she ventures in. Every step she takes away from the mouth of the cave, the entrance of the cave, the light starts to fade. And almost at the last moment of visible light, where she's just barely able to make out that it exists, she finds herself in front of a Y in the cave. The cave splits into two directions. And as the first inkling of decision making pops into her head, she hears this booming voice. And it very clearly directs her. It says, "You must choose. The path to the left will lead you to a life of ease and comfort. The path to the right will lead you towards something else." And then the voice goes completely silent. And she's left with this dilemma to go left or right. Being that she is who she is, she heads down the path to the right, the path of something else. Last 30 seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, we'll help that right leg back up to skyward. bend the right knee and compress that right hip one more time. When it feels appropriate, let's extend the right leg back towards the ceiling. Flex the toes towards the nose and flex the quad so that you really bring some active strength into that right leg. Toes are active, quad is active, and we're just feeling in to how the hamstring responds to this level of activation. And then we'll relax the right leg down on the mat. And we just land here. And we feel into the asymmetry of the body. Just really giving in to the asymmetry here. Noticing how the hips lay. Noticing the potential variance in left-right leg length. Noticing how the glutes settle. Maybe even the amount of release in the right hamstring versus the left hamstring, kind of connecting into the mat. And then eventually, we'll make our transition from our right foot to our left. Strapping the left foot and then bringing the left foot skyward, ceilingward. Thinking about the strap in the left hand, left elbow anchoring, really keeping the shoulders neutral as you make this first transition of left leg across our body. And then once you get to the potential landing point, right, then we make the adjustment up or down so that we create the ease or the space, depending on what feels most appropriate. And then maybe the left shoulder comes back down and the right hand takes over on the stability side. Going down this path to the right, this little girl almost immediately encounters this huge storm. Somehow there is this massive thunderstorm with this huge amounts of wind and this torrential pounding of rain. And she learns to kind of find her way behind objects that provide shelter for these little temporary lightening softenings of the storm. And then she moves forward during those. And eventually she passes through this storm. And that challenge of this incredibly powerful storm teaches her resiliency. Remembering that the adjustments you make are for your benefit. Find positions where you're expanding your physicality, but also where you are freeing your respiration. And we'll give ourselves about 30 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate, we'll bring that left leg back skyward. Extend the right leg to create that length, and then pull the left thigh in towards the rib cage. Just the reminder that this particular compression may feel a little bit more intense than your traditional compressions, just because of the amount of kind of energy we had in that. Oh. Femur, femoral head. And then when you feel like you're fully compressed, we'll extend our left leg back towards the ceiling or sky. And then transitioning the strap over into the right hand. Let's let that leg fall out nice and wide. And as the leg falls out wide, left hand can take over with the stability and the placement. And we just think about where the benefit comes from in this, or where the maximum benefit would come from our leg position. And we find that, and we've settled to that. Not long after she escapes the storm, she encounters this wild beast. And it's like nothing she's ever seen before. It's huge and it's powerful, and it clearly is bigger, stronger, faster than her. But through her wit and through the availability of the environment, she takes this beast down. And through that process, she really learns the value of resourcefulness. And as she continues deeper and deeper into this cave, she encounters more and more of these obstacles. Each one of them teaching her a lesson. Each one of them presenting her with the opportunity to learn a new skill. Last about 30 seconds here on this second side. Remembering as you finish this shape out that the adjustments you make are for your benefit. And then eventually we'll bring that left leg back to the sky and compress the left thigh one more time. Left hip one more time. More anatomically correct. When you feel like you've really encapsulated that compression, let's extend the left leg towards the sky. We'll activate the toes and then flex into the quad. Really think about how that quad activation, remember, you can do this with the knee bent. We just want quad activation. And the quad activation really does change the way the hamstring receives this shape. Toes active, quad active, not overpowering our capacity to fluidly breathe, though. Still staying with our capacity for ease and fluidity within our breath, even with that good quad engagement. And then we'll relax the left leg down to the mat, and it will mirror the right. And we'll settle here. And we'll breathe here, and our body will relax here. Our body will be at ease here. And we just appreciate what we've done. We'll give ourselves 60 more seconds just to settle in. Again, this is my favorite portion of class. Shavasana is the most important portion of class. This is my favorite portion of class, when we really just get to settle and breathe into all of the physical changes we've made. You know, feel into the newness of our body. Eventually, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. So knees can bend. Bottoms of the feet on the mat. Kneecaps pointing towards the ceiling. And then let's bring a little dynamic lateral sway through the knees. Allow the hips to follow, allow the lumbar to follow. Kind of a little bit of fluid movement for some integration of what we've done. The rate of movement, the rate of respiration, all your choice to your benefit. And the next time the knees fall over to the left, let's let them stay there. Challenge after challenge after challenge, this young girl overcomes. Each challenge presenting its own lesson, until eventually she emerges on the other side of the cave. And when she does, she's no longer this kind of lost little girl. She's this powerful, intelligent, aware woman. And we'll bring our knees back to neutral. As you settle here, think about balancing out the hips. Push down into the toe mounds and heels, but really think about keeping the hips even as you lift yourself up into a little bridge. And then creating your bridge of your choice, we'll slowly, gently, delicately release ourselves back down to our mat. And then we will exhale our knees over to the second side, the right side. Years later, when her people's island is eventually discovered by other groups of humans, she leads the charge of her people to defend off their attacks. And time after time after time, when her community is challenged, she rises to the occasion. So much so that she becomes as close to a superhero as a real community could ever have. A true folk hero throughout the entirety of her life. And when the time finally comes for her to retire, so that she can enjoy her contentment from the rocking chair on her front porch. When you feel balance left to right, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. We'll once again find that balance in our toe mounds and heels, drift our awareness to our hips, and elevate the hips into a bridge where we really keep that bilateral balance across the sacrum. And then eventually, we'll slowly, gently, delicately release our tailbone down to the mat and ask ourselves if there's anything that we could offer to our body, to our mind, to our breath that would be beneficial for Shavasana. And if there is, we'll give that to ourselves now. And if we're ready for some stillness, we'll drift right into that stillness now. So as she spends her days in her rocking chair on her front porch, the younger members of the community will often come by and beg her to tell the story of the magical cave. And when it feels appropriate for you, just drifting into that stillness. Each time she tells the story, she tells it the same way. As the community gathers around, she says there was no magic in that cave. There was only a choice. We'll start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes. Through our hands into our wrists, through our feet into our ankles, to the knees, to the elbows, to the shoulders, to the hips, neck and head. Eventually, the entirety of our body will move, and we'll utilize that movement to transition from the shapes we are in, finding ourselves in a seat, spine tall, breath fluid. And she continues on saying, I am responsible for every single thing that I am and every single thing that I am not. And you are too. With our next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself of the easiest way to access the divinity within you is to accept the full responsibility, not just for your lives, but for the entirety of the cosmos, and see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. Love the heck out of you. Have a beautiful week. No class tomorrow, MLK Day. We will be back next Sunday to recharge, and then we'll move next Monday. Love the heck out of you. Mwah!